Hi, good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, March 8th, 2022, and it happens to be International Women's Day. So, on behalf of Alex and I on the Alex and Mo show, we want to wish every single woman, anyone who identifies as a woman, happy Women's Day. And we are truly grateful, especially to our mothers, our siblings, and Alex, your in laws, um,
Absolutely.
who work tirelessly to ensure that our lives are made better because of your presence, your assistance, and your support. So, thank you and happy International Women's Day.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you to all the women out there. As Mo mentioned, special shout out to my wife, Lauren, because I mean, I can't do this podcast. I can't do a lot of the other things that I am blessed with the opportunity to do without her support. She is truly my rock, my best friend, and a great mother. And through her, and obviously my mother, my mother in law, my sister, I've gotten a chance to appreciate what women do, man, and it requires a lot. Women were created to bring life into this world, and that's not easy. And Even though the women that choose not to or can't have that opportunity, I mean, they're still going through it, and they're still finding ways to get it done, and they get it done. They absolutely get it done. So happy International Women's Day to all our family, friends, and listeners.
Definitely. And it is our hope as you continue to listen to our podcast and the message that we try to put across, that you are moved to action to create more inclusion, more equity for women. I definitely know that it has been an issue, especially in our profession, in terms of representation and leadership, because we were a profession created by women. And I know that was a hot selling T-shirt at the combined section in San Antonio. I think it was sold out. But there continues to be a huge disparity in the pay gap between what our men make and what women make. Also, in terms of speaking opportunities, we tend to have more men getting called to be speakers at conferences. So it has improved over the years that I have been attending conferences, but we definitely need to make a more concerted effort to create equality and equity for women in our profession and women in the work field.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think the pay gap thing is a huge issue, especially with the state of our economy and gas, inflation, and all those things. It makes things harder when you're doing the same amount of work and not bringing in the equal or if not more money. So, um, I think it starts at the top with those, owners, whether they be private practice or a corporation. Somebody has to take the initiative to not have a gap, right? A gap exists because it's allowed to exist. Because it's pretty easy, at least in our profession, to say, men, women, you're doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing. We bill the same way. Doesn't matter. We don't bill differently as a male than you would bill as a female. We're billing the exact same thing, but somehow there's a disconnect there, or a gap, as it words it. So yeah, it starts at the top, and hopefully as more women take the initiative to speak their minds, not be, you know, not hold back, and it's receptive, because again, it's like what we've always talked about in our podcast is, let's just have a conversation, let's just listen, and then see where we can go from there. And I think those conversations need to be had between those people in charge, those people making those decisions, and the female workers. Hey, you know, just ask questions. Try to bring the transparency out, because we know that most of those companies are not going to just openly tell you, hey, your male coworker over there is making X amount of dollars more, or you're making this, and you know that just doesn't get shared. So
Uh,
yeah, it,
Definitely, as a business owner, if you as an employee aren't coming to me negotiating or asking for an increase in a pay rate and giving me justifiable reasons why you think you deserve a pay rate, I'm not gonna come out and just say, "Hey, you deserve this." So we also have to get better at negotiating. But you and I have been going back and forth in terms of like that pay gap when it comes to sports, with the U.S. women's team and the U.S. men's national soccer team, and also with the WNBA and the NBA. And it's interesting that you made a very valid point that you don't get billed differently if you're a female therapist versus a male therapist. However, when it comes to athletics, in terms of men's soccer versus women's soccer and women's basketball versus men's basketball, there's a huge difference in terms of market competition. And even though the women players um, aren't paid as well, and a lot of them have to go abroad, especially to Russia and other European countries, just to supplement the salary that they make. Um, the sponsorship, the TV market is there for the NBA, and those players deserve the contracts that they have. Um, Even though US women's soccer is more popular than men's soccer, the majority of the money that the men's team gets comes from the like in the world, like what the soccer federation
yeah,
gets.
it's
And
FIFA. It's
yeah,
FIFA. I mean, uh, I'm glad you brought it up. People that follow me on Twitter, I've made this argument. I have nothing against women's sport. I watch women's sports every now and then. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a women's aficionado, because I'm not. But soccer is something I grew up playing. Soccer is in my blood. I'm Colombian. It's what we know. And the
yeah,
argument that is made for the women's team, even with the ruling that they just had, to where the U.S. Soccer Federation said, hey, we're going to back pay you all this equal money. I think it came out to like 27-30 million dollars, something like that. But then they made a comment that they're going to work towards trying to equalize the pay moving forward. And to me, that's very interesting wording. I almost want to laugh at it because it's not realistic. We have the World Cup this year, which normally
uh-huh,
gets played in the summer, but now it's even played in November because it's being hosted by Qatar, which that's another corruption in its own.
yeah,
That's a topic for another day. But like you said, the men's World Cup is going to be watched all over the world, and the amount of money that goes
uh,
into that sponsorship, it's basically almost equivalent, if not greater, than the Super Bowl. But it goes
mhm.
over a course of a month, so that amount of money gets pumped into the tournament. Well, that's how FIFA is then able to turn around and give big chunks out to all these countries. When the Women's World Cup is played, I watch it. I
Mhm.
love soccer. I watch it at any level.
Yep.
But you're not getting the whole world per se to watch. It's big here in the U.S. And like you said, the U.S. women's soccer team has been by far more successful, more popular than the men's team. But that's here. That's here in the
It's only
U.S.
it's only it's only in the US
It's in the
compared to
U.S.
where other games the game
Yeah.
is popular, like England, Spain, Brazil, Argentina. No, even Sweden. Because Sweden is another popular women's.
Yeah.
soccer team. It's not that big, and I understand we want equity, we want equality, but it doesn't justify the market and the talent pool compared to men's football and soccer. And I know feminists might come after me, but I stand by
Well,
my position.
but
I
this
go
could be our
for
this could be our first controversial moment on the show. But to me, it's just facts. I mean, you even had some of the U.S. women go play in the Premier League for women. I know off the top of my head, Tobin Heath, I think is her name,
Mhm,
plays for City. I think it is over in the
mhm.
women. And like even the women over there, it took a while for the Premier League to just open the women's side of it. You know,
Yep.
they're just getting the traction going. And the English Premier League for the men's side is one of the biggest, most popular leagues in the world.
And their
Um,
stadiums are filled. Even here, when I go to a DC United game, the stadiums aren't even full. And we had professional women's soccer here in the US. The stadiums weren't filled either, except for when it was coming close to like World Cup or when there was a hype event around women's soccer. But it's not
yeah,
consistent.
they don't have the support, a
Yeah,
consistent support. As you mentioned, when it's around the World Cup, during the World Cup, shortly thereafter the World Cup, especially when the women have won it, yeah, they can pack stadiums. I mean, they played here in Tampa after the last World Cup. I mean, that place was packed.
hmm
But at the same time, the U.S. men's team a couple of years ago played Colombia here in Tampa, and that place was probably at that time when the Bucks weren't good and didn't have Tom Brady. There was more people in the stadium for that game than there was football, and there was more Colombians in the stadium for that game than there was American fans, right? So the
exactly.
support hasn't always been there, so it's kind of hard to justify an equal amount of money from outside the federation. Let me clear that up because there's
Mhm.
money from the federation and there's money outside the federation. Absolutely, if both of those teams travel, they should have equal access to the same hotels, the same kind of meals. Like that's the federation. The federation can afford to pay for those things and should be paying those things equally. But
Yeah.
outside of that, the rest of the money comes from marketing and FIFA. And you know what? If you don't have a big brand, or even if your brand is, you think it's big, but you can't pull that kind of viewership or eyes on it, then no business is going to put money on you. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yep.
You've got to be able to showcase and bring in viewers, clicks, and all that stuff for those companies to justify that money. And it's just always hard to do it, unfortunately, with women's sports. And basketball is the same thing. Shoot, I read something, I think it was last week. The Brooklyn, the WNBA team out of Brooklyn or New York, whichever one of them, I think it's the Liberty.
Liberty.
Um,
Yeah.
they got fined because at some point last season, their team chartered a plane, and that's considered uh, an unfair advantage because not every other NBA WNBA team can charter planes.
Oh gosh, this just takes me back to college with
So it's like you see, like
with all
that,
those.
that to me is a problem. If I'm the owner of a women's team and I
Mhm.
want to spend the money so that my team can travel in comfort and all, like why am I being penalized? That's see, like that's where the equity should be. Like, no, it doesn't matter. You know, everybody should be allowed to travel, but it's deemed an unfair advantage. So
Yeah.
they got fined. They were possibly going to close the team down, from what I read. Now, I don't know all the details, but that to
Yeah,
me is
I'll have to read
crazy.
up. I'll have to read up more on
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
look it
but
up because it was like it's just crazy to me. But it was a rule. It's a rule where it says that you can't fly you can't charter a plane because not every other team can afford to charter a plane.
Mhm.
You know, so there's different issues. Some which are very valid, and some that which are a little bit just out of the hands of just purely saying, oh, we're women, we're making less. Like there's different factors, and I know at least for sure in the soccer, it's a huge disconnect between FIFA and
Hmm.
what FIFA pumps into the men's soccer as opposed to what it pumps into women. It's just not the same.
Definitely. So we both agree that yes, we want equality, we want equity, we want diversity and inclusion. However, when it comes to the sports market, there is a disparity, and trying to have equal pay on that level is,
A lot
in
more
my opinion,
challenging.
yes.
A lot more
Let's yes,
challenging.
yes, let's use the word challenging, so we don't get attacked. Uh, so, but moving on. Again, I love women's sports. I support women's sports. But again, yeah.
It's hard. It's just hard. It's hard. It's hard. I mean,
All right.
but yeah. But
Yes.
just another challenging, and to kind of segue into our next topic, which just as challenging is,
Mm,
it seems like outpatient physical therapy is going through some challenges right now, and trying to find its
mm,
way in this reimbursement or payment world to where you can pay those equal salaries, you can still make money as a business owner, um, and give access to those who need the care. I mean, those are three separate things which kind of come together to really make up what outpatient is. And I haven't been an outpatient in a while now. I miss it, but I don't. um, I definitely don't miss these headaches, these billing issues, the access issues, the giving the value, because now you've got people who have to pay copays. I mean, when you're giving PT in the acute care setting, in the home health setting, yeah, there's money being transferred, but it's not necessarily coming at that given moment directly out of the patient's pocket, so to speak, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Because when we go into a patient's home, we're not collecting a copay. More often, I have heard of it happen. I've never actually done it myself, but I have heard situations where that comes up. But for the most part, we walk in, we give them the care that they need. We tell them when we're coming back if we need to come back, and then we just keep doing that. But outpatient, person walks up to the front desk. Hey, how you doing? Welcome to blank blank PT.
XYZ. You
Blank
have a
blank
$50
PT.
copay,
Yeah, here's
and
your
you must pay
copay.
before. Yeah, must pay
Yeah,
before you start therapy.
yeah. So your copay is, when I was an outpatient, I saw copays as low as 5. I saw copays as high as 100 plus.
Hmm.
You know, so, and
Or
I
if you have a
know.
deductible,
Say it again.
or if you have a deductible, and most
Yeah,
people have a deductible of $2,000 or more for the calendar year that they must pay before the insurance kicks in to pay for any specialist service. And
yeah,
physical therapy is considered a specialist service.
and then that was something that we saw, a discussion we saw on Twitter today, where the therapists themselves were like, "Shoot, I work here. I can't pay I can't pay a visit for myself if I needed it." Some
Mhm.
gave the example of having those high deductibles. So you got to pay the first 7 grand out of your own pocket, and you got to go to PT. Now you're paying 100 plus, 75 plus, right? And we, again, we've talked about how you don't go into PT to be rich, but at the same time, for the most part, we make a pretty decent living.
Mhm.
So if us as therapists make decent money, have we'll just say an obstacle or a speed bump to pay those kind of uh, that kind of money to have one session, how do we expect people that are not as fortunate, or sometimes even if you do make good money, but you've got so many different responsibilities, like how do you prioritize your health versus putting food on the table, keeping the lights on. Shoot, in this time we've
Or
even
staying in your own home
it's
because
staying, yeah,
yeah,
staying in the one home, or in today's world, because I've seen it again discussed on Twitter, is shoot, I don't think I can drive to PT today because I'm gonna waste this gas getting there, but I really need to drive to work, or I need to drive to pick up my child.
yep.
Like all these decisions that come into play,
And you
and
can't
it's
even
just,
miss work because if you miss work, you're not gonna get paid for that hour and a half that is gonna be used up getting to and from therapy.
yeah. And then we run into the issue with the text that you and you shared with me, and you briefly posted on Twitter not too long ago. Is like, okay, so now
Mhm.
I've paid 50, 75, 100. I don't care even if you don't have a copay specifically for this issue or for any issues. Now you've got to show your value. You've got
Yep.
to show your value so that that person wants to come back. And even
Hmm.
if they're not paying a deductible or a copay or whatever, like you still got to give them something to hang on to so that they can come back. Because if not, they're going to be like, why am I doing this? I can do this on my own. Right.
And a lot of them do feel that way. Out of full transparency, one of the many internal battles that I had as an outpatient therapist, and the last time I practiced outpatient therapy was January 2012. No, no, no. Actually, no. It was, yes, January 2012 was the last time I worked at a outpatient clinic. Um, Even though my patients were obtaining the outcomes that I set, I didn't feel like I was giving them my all because of the double booking and the triple booking. I was spending at most 10, 15 minutes with each patient, doing something manual while the rest of the time that they were there for physical therapy was spent with my physical therapy tech supervising them doing the exercises. So when it came time to documenting and billing, I had to ask the tech, hey, how did Mrs. Jones perform during this activity and stuff like that? And I'm like, I'm not having a direct eye, but yes, I know I trained my techs very well to be able to communicate with me if they notice something off. But I didn't feel like, with home health, when I'm with that patient one on one, 30 minutes to an hour, we are engaged in a full on conversation. It's just that person and myself, and the entire treatment is focused on them. I didn't feel like I was giving that while I was an outpatient. And when billing, it was an ethical dilemma that I faced. So that was something I had to think about as well too. But as a profession, we lose customers from a lack of communication. We don't set expectations, lack of attention, and sometimes plain disrespect because sometimes patients might feel like you don't have time for them. And as indicated by that particular tech, patients can sense when you tend to gravitate towards a certain kind of patient demographic. And you know, if a surgeon has to do surgery, or everybody has arthritis pain after a certain age, whether you're rich or poor, and they come into outpatient. So if someone doesn't come in like well dressed and in the best of hygiene or whatever, you as a therapist can't say like, oh, I'm not gonna work with this particular patient because I don't get along well, and also the stereotype with the type of insurance a patient may have. So you tend to discriminate against patients who have Medicaid or certain types of state insurances. So a client wouldn't want to come in that environment when they're feeling rejected or discriminated um, by a clinician. How do you expect them to truly achieve the goal if they feel like you are not fully invested in their outcome or their well-being? So Um, I know a lot of the cuts that we've been getting from insurance companies is has been a result of repeated abuse of billing, and we contributed to this. We have to fix it, and we can't be sitting on the sideline complaining that the insurance is unfair and stuff like that when we statistically contributed to abuse and misuse of services. So that's
No,
just
no,
my
absolutely. I mean, I think, when I was in outpatient, the scenario that you described, you're not alone. And I think if we took a poll, I'd venture to guess that most clinicians who practice in outpatient today face that situation at least a couple times a week, if not daily, right? Because
Mhm.
that's just the nature of outpatient. Doesn't necessarily make it ideal, doesn't make it right, but that's what happens. We can't sit here and say it doesn't. It happens, and it happens in multiple places at multiple times. Now, I did it when I
Mhm.
was an outpatient. I think for certain clients that can work, but it's an individualized thing. You can't just do it across the board and expect it to always work. For some
Yes.
situations, that does work, and you can make that work. Uh, but you've got to make that connection. When I was a faculty member at the PT program at the University of South Florida, I always told the students, I'm like, you could be the best therapist in the world, but if you can't communicate with people, if you can't make a connection with the person in front of you, all that knowledge you have doesn't mean anything to them, right? Like, we're in the people business. What we do is we talk to people all day, every day. We have to interact with people. If you can't do that, you're not going to, this isn't for you, or you're going to struggle. And I had students that struggled because they could not communicate. You put them in front of a person, they struggled. Ask them any question about anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, whatever it was, and they were spitting them out left and right. But that doesn't work in the clinic, right? So it doesn't matter what what setting you're in. You've got to connect with people. That's what we do all day, every day. And
Yes, and I agree. It matters too in the home health setting. You have to have that connection.
well, even
Must.
more so because you're walking into their house.
Yep.
So now you're a stranger coming into their house. And if you can't connect with them, if you can't reach them as a human being, man, you probably won't get back in that house. Or if you are in that house, you're not going to be there for long because
Nope.
they're not going to see the value. And
Yep.
I always tell my patients after every eval, I always ask them, I'm like, is this something that you value? Because if you don't, and I don't honestly, whatever the reason, if you tell me I don't value it, whatever your reason is, that's fine. I respect it. But just tell me, because I don't want to waste your time. Like, don't
Yep.
worry about my time. If it's not you, it's the next patient. I'm gonna stay busy. But I don't want to come here if you don't value this. If there's no value in it for you, I don't want to waste your time. And in the outpatient world, that's how you end up with cancels and no shows.
Very true. I mean,
Cancels
clients
and
are
no cancels and no shows in outpatient. And I know Jerry's extensive done work in this area, but I'd
yeah,
venture to say cancels and no shows are because they didn't value what you were doing. And
very true.
if you're determining the value that you're going to put into that session based on what insurance they have, what they
Or how
look
many
like,
minutes they're gonna bill.
or how you're going to build, what they look like, you're going to have a rough time. You're going to have a rough time. And very similar to the things that we discuss, when like in business, I always say, like, if you do things the right way, the money will come. The money will
Uh,
come,
yeah,
right?
very, very true.
So for me, it's like when I think of some of the things that I just observe on Twitter and discussions specifically about outpatient, about Medicaid and some of these other private insurances, I'm like, yeah, Medicaid doesn't pay well, whatever that rate may be. But I promise you, if you started taking those patients and you delivered top notch care, you're going to start to get a lot more money rolling through the doors. Because guess what? That person on Medicaid, they know people that have private insurance. They know people that have cash, and they'll come and pay cash. And then they know people, right? It's always like they say, the 6 degrees of separation. But if you don't treat those people right because you've deemed them as not important enough because they have Medicaid or because of the way they look, the way they
Mhm.
dress, you know, whatever that case may be, you've narrowed your potential. Um,
The thing is, as a business owner, what I can say is that with Medicaid, you're guaranteed your money, and $1 is better than $0. Okay, so if you have a good mix of private insurance, Medicare, and Medicaid, it will do well for your business. If you are in an area where a large population of your people have Medicaid and you want to be involved in that community, to be a PT clinic in that community, it will behoove you to serve what your demographic looks like. People will show support to people who value them and show value to them. They
yeah,
will come. They won't
absolutely.
have any cancellation of visits. So it's how you treat people that matters.
Yeah,
So when people say, "Oh, I want to get," I think somebody mentioned that they want to get $14 in Illinois for Medicaid. That's why they don't take Medicaid, and I'm like, $14 for a visit? That's crazy.
it
That is.
is. It is. But here's my thing though. Again, like I think sometimes you can go further with less.
Yep.
What I mean by that is, so yes, you take this one individual because nobody else will give them the time of day. But you do your part, you treat them right, you treat them as human beings, you help them reach their goals, and they're gonna talk. They're gonna talk. Man, you need to go see Mo. Mo
Hmm.
took care of me. Mo gave me time, and now I'm better. Guess what? Now I'm better because now I can go to work and not be in pain. I can provide for my family. And I'm going to tell everybody that I work with to go see Mo. Not everybody's on Medicaid, man. Not
And
it
that's
just it's
so
not
true.
everybody. But
That's
they
so true.
need but those people need help too. And if you
They do.
help them, I'm a strong believer karma. You do good, then things are gonna come back to you tenfold. But to purely say like, oh, I'm not gonna deal with you because I can't make as much money from you, like, why are we doing this? Because
Yeah,
again,
it's
we didn't
putting
come to this profession to be rich, and we sure as hell we more than likely came to this profession because we enjoy helping people.
true. And you know what a lot of people used to say? That I heard it a lot, that physical therapists spend more time with patients. And mm, is that really true?
You mean
Because in compared to like a physician who comes to a patient's bedside, yes, we have to do more in terms of like transfers and exercises and stuff like that. So it will take more than a 10-minute consult with a patient. But as you said, in an outpatient setting, there are times where we are only spending about 10 to 15 minutes with a patient, depending on the scheduling.
yeah,
And I'm wondering if the productivity demand has contributed to that somewhat, and if that's contributing to the higher complaints of therapy burnout, which patients can also feel. Um, and not only in the outpatient setting, but I hear a lot of therapists in the home health setting complaining about documentation. A lot of them avoid doing starter cares because they
yeah.
complain that they don't want to do the Oasis documentation.
Yeah, I mean, there's been times where I physically have the time, and I'll have an agency or somebody reach out, hey, I have a startup care here, and I'm just like, not today, not tomorrow, not this week. Like I just don't feel like dealing with the oasis, right? Like, yeah, that happens. You know, we've got good days, we've got bad days.
Yeah.
And the strain of productivity, the strain of completing an oasis startup care, like sometimes I'm like, I don't really care how much you're going to pay me for this. Like, I'm just not in the right headspace to do it.
Mhm.
You know, I need to go home. I need to be with my wife. Like, you know, that kind of stuff just sometimes does lead to that. In the outpatient, yeah, if I look at my schedule, because I remember looking at my schedule. Now, granted, they didn't do this to me that much. I had a very cool clinic director and all these things, and we had a good system, but it still happened. You get like two, three evals back to back to back to back. Then you have two patients scheduled, then another two scheduled 30 minutes after that. And you're like, where the hell am I? Like, how am I doing this? Right. So, yeah, absolutely. All being pulled in 10, 15 different directions and having to accomplish all of this in a specific time frame, and still wanting to take a lunch and trying to leave on time and not taking your work home, like absolutely all those things can cause burnout and cancellations, even if you're splitting visits with a tech or a PTA. But I still firmly believe that if you're a good person, people can see that, and that only takes a couple minutes of an interaction. You know, usually I can talk to somebody, and within a couple of minutes, I can get what I like to believe to be a decent idea as to what this person is about, and how this interaction could potentially grow if it needed to, right? So to me, it just boils down to, again, we're in a people business. And if you're with somebody for 5, 10, 30, 45, an hour, whatever it may be, you always have to put your best foot forward, and treat the other person on the other side of that interaction with the respect that you would want from somebody who's just meeting you. Because that just goes a long way. And it's sad that we have to say that. It's sad that we have to say to treat other people with respect, but it's just crazy that when you do those things, 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be a positive outcome. And you're going to find that that person is now your biggest fan, and
Yeah.
they're going to tell their friends. And I say this because it's happened to me. Like, I'm not just making this up, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've had people call me up and say, hey, I need somebody to come do PT evals and start to care for me. I'm like, but how did you find me? Like, I'm not actively looking. Or like, oh, you worked with such and such and they spoke highly about you. I want to meet you. And on the other side of that, I've had families that will track me down because, hey, you treated my sister, you treated my aunt, you treated my neighbor, and they just loved you. I need you to come out here. Like, how did you find me? Right? Because it's not like, for me personally, I'm not going around handing out business cards or anything like that. I'm the type of person that, let me do my work, let me see my patients. I'm going home to my wife and kids. Like, that's it. You know.
And like one tip I can give, especially if you work in an outpatient setting, I made sure that even though I was with another patient, but I knew a patient was coming in at a certain time, I would pause and I'll make sure I go to the front desk and say hello to that patient, find out how they were before they got started with anything, even if they had to go on the bike or the treadmill or get electrical stimulation prior to me coming to see them. I made sure that I greeted each person once they got in if they were on my schedule. So it's like I started off talking with them and I would finish talking with them. So we will catch up no matter what. And business tip. One of the reasons why I had named my business after my name, so it'll be easier for people to find me on the internet. Um, they wouldn't have to worry too much about, or do I have a right number or anything like that. They just type in the name if they remember that I was a therapist who saw that. So that's how word of mouth actually did spread and allowed my business to continue to grow as well too. So
And
go
go
ahead.
ahead, sorry, go ahead, finish.
Yeah, so that's just a good tip if you're looking for branding. There are companies that go after name companies after themselves, like Walt Disney, Hewlett Packard. So if you want to be known by your name and for what you do, because you are basically your brand, that's what you put. Don't be afraid to name your company after you.
Absolutely. And the tip that you had where you would meet the client at the beginning, like I'll take that one step further.
Hmm.
Because I did this when I was an outpatient and it worked wonders. Your front desk staff is the most important person that you will work with, right?
Yeah.
Again, kind of like I said earlier, you could be the best therapist, but if you can't connect with people, your knowledge means nothing. Again, you could be the best therapist, but if you can't have a good relationship with your front desk people, or if your front desk people can't have a good relationship with the clients coming in, and I can't tell you how many times I had to put out fires before we even got started because of a problem at the front desk. And it's not always the front desk person's fault, but they take the brunt. And then the ball just rolls on down. So now you're getting a client who's just pissed off for whatever reason because that interaction in the front. So what I would always do is, I took care of the girls in the front, bring them
Yep.
coffee, get them a little gift on administrative day, like just little things, because if you take care of them, they will take care of you.
So true.
Like
So
it was, people would be like, "Hey, Alex," the girls would come back like, "Alex, Mrs. Jones is here. She's running a little bit late, but I told her, blah 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 blah. Everything is good." So I go get Miss Jones. Miss Jones is in a good mood. We can keep going, make the progress we done. Or, hey, Alex, Mr. Smith, he's a little pissed off today, man. Like he thought his appointment was at this. Can you try to squeeze him in or do what you can? I'm like, no problem. I'll deal with it. Right. But they were that first line of defense for both the good and the bad.
yep.
And that's critical. That's critical because that is the first person they see. Yes, they're here to see you, their therapist, but the first person they interact with is that front desk staff checking them in. And if that person is not having a good day, or if the client's not having a good day and they don't know how to respond, and it sets up for a long day for you. So, my personal tip is take care of your front desk staff, help them, teach them how you want things to kind of be ran so that everything is smooth from start to finish.
And we could carry that over into home health. If you're in home health, be kind to your schedulers. Get to know them. Treat them the same way Alex said to treat the front desk person, because those schedulers will have your back on any given day. When things are up, when things are low, you're going to be a priority. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
treat people
And
well. Treat
and
people well.
here a common theme again. Just treat people nice.
Yep.
Just treat people the nice, respectful way. You'd be amazed how much you get from that. But for
Yep.
some reason,
Dignity goes a long way. Dignity goes
it
a
for
long
some reason, people sometimes forget that. So it's just friendly reminder from Alex and Mo. Treat
Yep.
your administrative staff nicely because they take
Yep.
care of you and they can make your life very difficult if they choose to.
So true. So true. So another interesting thing, we started off talking about sports as well, to tying edge into Women's Day, but something recently happened in the NFL where they chose to suspend a player for a year because the games he missed, he apparently made some sports bet.
Yeah.
And
So it's pretty interesting. And I feel like the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I'm kind of upset about this.
Mhm.
Um, obviously, you should never, as an athlete, be betting on your own sport, I feel, per se,
Mhm.
on a very basic level. But this incident was a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
because it was Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. He was, he took a leave of absence middle towards the end of the season. So he was not playing at all. And he decided to bet on some football games, some of
Mm-hmm.
which were the Atlanta Falcons. And he picked them to win. They won, and he got caught. But then I started to dig a little bit deeper into this. And like, first question is, how did he get caught? Like, how do you know what somebody was doing? Because like people were like, man, you got to have a fall guy. You can't make those bets like on your own. Like you got to get your buddy to make those bets for you, right? So which is fair. It's fair. Like you're the player. You've got the
Uh-huh.
most to lose. Hey, let me get my buddy over here. Yo, go put this bet down for me. Um,
Yeah.
and we'll start off by just disclaimer. Please be smart if you're gonna gamble. Like that, there's people that can take it too far. I do it for
Mm,
fun. But
yeah.
anyways, so he gets caught because he places a bet here in Florida with the only legal sports betting app in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that company ends up telling a third party company that the NFL uses to monitor activity.
Oh, okay.
So he places the bet with the Hard Rock, which mind you, a month later they lost. They had to close down because of legal issues. So
Mm-hmm.
he placed a bet in the small time frame that was like that company could function. But
Mm-hmm.
anyways, the NFL has this group or third party which just monitors any kind of activity through its players or whatever the case may be. So that's how he gets caught. And again, he ends up getting suspended for a year. But the owner of that sports betting app, we're going to call it. Guess who that was?
Stephen Ross,
Yes,
the owner of the Miami
the
Dolphins,
owner of Miami Dolphins.
who
So
allegedly paid his coach to tank games.
he offered Brian Flores $100,000 per game to lose,
Mm.
right? So Calvin
By
Ridley
the way, where's that investigation? Or is there an investigation?
the NFL owners investigate themselves and then they decide what they want to do with it. So it's like the investigation hasn't really gone anywhere. I'm sure it'll come up in Brian Flores's uh,
The position?
lawsuit, but that's probably going to go to arbitration and we won't ever hear about anything that happened with it. But it's just funny to me how the NFL wants to talk about integrity, and that's why Calvin Ridley is getting suspended for a year because the integrity of the game, like we can't have players betting on games. Mind you, he was not playing in any of the games. But then their owners can say, "Hey, I'm going to pay this coach $100,000 a game to lose so that we can get a better draft pick." And and then at the same time, the NFL will tell its players, "Hey, you can't bet on games." But in that same breath, to all the NFL fans, hey, place your bets right now. Place your bets. The only reason that the NFL even is into the betting thing now is because they found a way to make money off of it.
Yep.
So integrity depends on who you're asking.
Well, they say money can't buy you happiness, but sometimes it could buy you some integrity too.
Yeah. Like I
So
said, like I always tell you, follow the money.
follow the
Follow
money.
the money. Follow the money because the NFL is just cashing in. And as long as it allows them to make money, they're going to be okay with it. The minute
Yes.
that it's perceived to be a problem, um, then they're going to cut it out. But it just doesn't make sense because you have a lot of domestic issues in the NFL with some of its players. They don't get suspended for a season. They get suspended for 4, 6 games, depending on the situation. Some may not even get that.
Especially during the season. And I honestly think if some of them weren't filmed or videotaped, like that guy who played on the Ravens, Rice.
Yeah,
What's his name? They
yeah.
probably not even be
It,
suspended,
it,
or
it,
they'll probably still be in the league right now.
there's just no consistency. So, you know, but anyways,
Yeah,
that's I think that's a good place for us to wrap up this
yeah,
episode. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun doing this. Thank
yeah.
you again to everybody.
I'm enjoying each episode, man.
Yeah,
So,
thank you to everybody that's watching, and go on the YouTube channel, subscribe, and let us know. Keep tagging us, keep putting us in some of these conversations so that we can try to take it a step further, and just bring more eyes and ears to the situation, just to try to help.
wonderful, wonderful. So again, everyone, have a good night. We'll be dropping this episode probably in an hour on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. So thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you. Continue to give us your feedback as well. So
Thank
see
you
you
guys.
guys. Yep, see you guys next week. All right. So Alex, you have a wonderful night. And what's on tonight? Oh, Brooklyn Nets are playing the Charlotte Hornets. I believe at the second quarter, Curry had like about 20 points, and they were up like almost 20 points too.
Yeah,
So it's
crazy.
crazy.
All right. Well, you guys
All
have a
right.
good evening. Good night, Mo. You be safe.
Thanks. You too. All right.